Carol and I want to welcome everyone to the residence. We really appreciate you being here tonight. It's a special night for all of us because, of course, tonight we're awarding the UCLA Medal to our very own Leonard Kleinrock. So, especially. So, professors, by their nature, are curious. They're curious people. We poke around, we prod, we ponder things, both big and small. We want to figure out how things work, how to make them better. We want to unearth novel understandings of ancient cultures, seek smart solutions to stubborn problems, and discover new answers to old questions. And sometimes, if we're persistent, if we're lucky, we may even create something that changes the way people live their lives. So Leonard Kleinrock is one of those persistent ones whose prodding and pondering has helped shape modern life. From a working-class family of Ukrainian Jewish immigrants, Len was born in Harlem in 1934 and raised in Washington Heights. He graduated Bronx High School of Science, and maybe that's the magic, because the number of people that have been successful from Bronx High School is astounding. So he graduated in 1951, after which his father asked him to stay in New York to help support the family. He spent 5.5 years working in New York while taking night classes at New York City College, where he received an undergraduate degree. He eventually went on to a PhD at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In the 1960s, while an MIT graduate student, Len created the mathematical theory of packet switching, a technique that allows different computers to communicate with each other by sharing information in bursts. That technique will help build the foundation of our modern age. 5 years later, as a UCLA professor, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, which later became the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, as most of us know it, asked Len to put his theory into practice. And he did, and more. On a historic night, October 29th, 1969, only 3 months after human beings first landed on the moon at 10:30 p.m., from his UCLA laboratory, Len directed the first message to be sent on what we now know as the internet, a message that went from a UCLA computer to a computer at Stanford Research Institute. We call the lab the birthplace of the internet, and it remains perfectly preserved in 3420 Boulter Hall. It's still there, so if you want to see it, there's the original lab. It's a moment in UCLA's history that brings us great pride, and Len helped organize a wonderful conference this past fall to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the transmission. Some of you were present. It was really a dazzling meeting. And also to confront the challenges we face today with the internet. So not only did it celebrate the past, it really began to address the challenges of the future. But that moment, a key event in the digital revolution, was only the beginning. In the 1980s, Len went on to chair the National Research Council that authored a report calling for a single high-speed network to connect the nation's computers. At that time, it was called by some the information superhighway. Today, it's called the internet. And while Eisenhower's interstate highway connected the nation, the information superhighway has connected the world. The creation of the internet is one of those moments that truly transforms the world, like the creations of the printing press, the light bulb, or the steam engine. Every aspect of human endeavor, from academic research to shopping, from political organizing to informal socializing, has been impacted by the internet. And all of us recognize it's just profound impact on humans. It's hard to imagine any single discovery could have so much power. How we understand each other, how we see the past, how we imagine the future have all been shaped and reshaped by the technology that Leonard Kleinrock was central in developing. As a kid, Len was a tinkerer, driven by curiosity. He'd disassemble and reassemble toys, build model airplanes, fix toasters, and experiment with electrical gadgets. While reading a Superman comic, I was told, he stumbled across instructions for making a build-it-yourself radio. Well, it did require him to buy one small electronic piece of equipment from a local store. Len was taken by the fact that the radio could be built almost entirely out of common household items, like a razor, pencil, and even an empty toilet roll. So I was thinking the toilet roll must have been the coil. And I think the razor and pencil were probably the diode. That's my guess. All right, so I got that, right? So when he assembled all these pieces and turned it on, amazingly, the homemade radio, which did not include a battery, actually worked. This was magic, he said. Where was it coming from? There didn't seem to be any energy going into the system. I just had to find out how it worked, and basically, I was hooked. That moment helped drive a fascination with engineering that took him to MIT and then to UCLA, to the famous lab in Boulter Hall, now being hailed as one of the fathers of the internet. But as grateful as we all are for Superman's contribution to this story, I hope Len will forgive me for suggesting that in order to understand Len's life and work, we must look past Superman to one of his competitors, Spider-Man, the star of the rival comic book, who made famous the modern maxim, with great power comes great responsibility. So whether he knows it or not, Len has had some Spider-Man in his heart. He made it quite clear, and ways he's spoken about quite clearly, about our obligation to ensure that the use of the power of the internet be used responsibly. In a powerful op-ed just last year, Len lamented that commercialization, corporate interests, nationalistic agendas, and various dangerous players came to dominate an internet that originally had been created in a spirit of honesty, trust, and connection. He wrote that a once convivial online community transformed into one of competition, antagonism, and extremism. And then, as the millennium ended, our revolution took an even more disturbing turn, which we continue to grapple with today. Len lamented that organized crime recognized the internet could be used for international money laundering, and extremists found the internet to be a convenient megaphone for their radical views. With the heartfelt urgency of a parent dismayed to see their child gone astray, he has called on governments, scientists, industry, and individual consumers to work together to restrain the pernicious effects of the internet and return it to what he calls the internet's ethical roots. His insistence on ethical roots, the acknowledgement that both our inventions and our intentions matter, demonstrate that Len Kleinrock not only has the intellect, but the character that merits the award tonight. So I'm going to ask him to join me, if he may, and I'd like to read the official UCLA Medal commendation. Len. Thank you. Leonard Kleinrock, as a professor, researcher, and innovator, your hard work and imagination led you to the mathematical theory of packet networks and helped create the technology underpinning the internet. In more than 250 insightful papers and 6 books on the subject, such as packet switching networks, broadband networks, performance evaluation, peer-to-peer networks, and more, you have helped provide the intellectual foundation for the modern technical age. You've transformed your UCLA laboratory into a historical landmark when your host computer became the first node in what was to become the internet, and where you directed transmission of the first message. This is an incredible honor for UCLA. This is unbelievable. Yes. This gives me a high every time I say that, right? The UCLA community has benefited from the intellectual leadership you've demonstrated as a professor of computer science and as chair of the computer science department. You've been a role model and a mentor to students and have supervised the research of dozens of graduate students who have gone on to become some of the world's most distinguished advanced networking experts. As the internet has grown in scope and influence, you have been a voice of conscience, urging us to consider the ethical implications of how we use the technology. Your creativity, ingenuity, and conviction that technology must serve the public good represents the best of UCLA's mission of research, education, and service. For these reasons, we are proud to bestow upon you the UCLA Medal, given at UCLA this 21st day of February, 2020. Congratulations.
So All that is written on the back of this medal? Thank you so much. It's an enormous honor. And thank you, Chancellor Block, Dean Murphy, the Computer Science Department, and all my friends and colleagues here. It's a special kind of award to receive it in a place that you consider your own country, because we all know that philosophers are never considered philosophers in their own country. So I want to thank you for making that recognition. It's especially meaningful to have the place where I live offer a recognition like this. And it's, you know, when you grow up, you spend most of your time trying to please your family. You know, your mother, your father, they're gone. You're my family. And I take great pleasure in having this honor in front of you. It's very meaningful to me. Before I go into my commentary, I want to point out that we have in the audience 2 other UCLA Medal of Honor winners, Maya and Rini Luskin and Jonathan Fielding, right over there. So I'm junior to these gentlemen and ladies. So I'd like to address not some of the technology or some of the impact. You said it so well, I don't want to repeat that. I want to talk about how I got from the streets of New York to the Chancellor's residence, and focus on 2 components: the environment in which I confronted and lived in and met, and the culture that surrounded those environments and how they basically forged the way I work and think and have come to where I am now. In terms of the environment, I want to talk about the extraordinary education opportunities and learning opportunities that I've encountered along the way. In terms of cultures, it's a diverse and unique set of cultures that have helped form the way I think and help me move along. Basically, it's been a privilege to inhabit those cultures. So you heard about my being born in a place called New York City, getting raised in New York City, in the streets of New York City, which many of you have had, not in New York, but your own difficult upbringing. You learn to deal with adversity, excitement. Anything you want is out there in the street, including the gangs. And you learn to take care of yourself. It basically makes you aware that there are challenges you're going to face, and you have to learn how to deal with it, and not just be passive and expect people and events to be in your favor necessarily. As you pointed out, Chancellor, I enjoyed games and gadgets and puzzles and sports and electronics, driven by the curiosity and the challenge of trying to deal with those wonderful, exciting items. So, elementary school. As a kid before elementary school, I was a wild kid. They wouldn't allow me into stores. They'd throw my mother and me out. I'd break things. But when I got to elementary school, this was a structured environment where they expected you to behave, and if you didn't, you got told about it. It was an amazing place with really brilliant kids. The environment of coming to a structured place where they expected you to do well and behave and learn with other people was a complete turnaround for me, and I'm still reeling from that. Toward the end of elementary school, I joined the Boy Scouts. Why? Not because I wanted to be Spider-Man or Superman. I wanted to be Tarzan. I wanted to get out into the jungle, become an Indian, American Indian, shoot arrows, chop wood, swim, canoe. And the concrete jungle of New York doesn't offer those opportunities. So the Boy Scouts did. So I joined the Boy Scouts, and I very much appreciated it. Not only did I learn all those exciting things, I learned about teamwork, cooperation, discipline, leadership, even though the Boy Scouts are in serious trouble right now, the leadership training you get in encountering that kind of culture, that kind of environment, again, put me in a different dimension of how I thought one should behave and grow. Then Bronx Science, what did I meet there? A bunch of wild-haired, budding scientists. It was a place of crazies, and a special kind of crazies, reaching to become scientists of all sorts. It was a culture, if you will, I would characterize that culture, a culture of exploration, trying to understand where one's going. And then it came time to go to college, and the only place I could go was CCNY, which happened to be the best college in America at the time. It was called the poor man's Harvard, and it was. And I was set to go, but as you heard, I had to go to night school because I had to bring money into the house. So who goes to night school for 5.5 years to get a degree which you get 4.5 years in the daytime? Well, crazies, dropouts, poor, highly motivated kids, and the GIs coming back from World War II. Now imagine being immersed in that kind of a culture, instead of going to an Ivy League school, which is pure and clean and structured, you know what to expect. You have no idea what to expect when you go to a place like that. And that enriched culture was, again, part of what helped forge my view on life. Because at night, I got the theoretical teachings from the professors. Those professors were working in the daytime, bringing their practical experience to the classroom. And I was working in an small electronics firm in downtown New York as a technician, then as an assistant engineer, designing, building, deploying, maintaining things. So I had the wonderful mix, which fit the way I grew up, of the theoretical, the understanding, but the intuition and the practical side. And that mix has basically formed the way I do my research, I work with my students, and think about engineering, science, and technology. Toward the end of CCNY, I was going to go to graduate school, and I heard that someone from MIT was coming by to describe a wonderful scholarship. And this person came by in the afternoon. I attended the lecture, and he described this fantastic scholarship with pay tuition, room and board, a salary, moving expense, the whole shebang. And he said, if you want to get an application, see the electrical engineering professor in the back of the room when I'm finished. So afterwards, I went up to this professor, and I asked him for an application. He says, I don't recognize you. He was an electrical engineering professor, and I was a double E student. I said, oh, well, you wouldn't recognize me. I go to evening session. He said, evening session? Get the hell out of here. I wrote away for an application. I got accepted. I remember this guy's name, and I won't tell you what it is, but it suited his personality. Privately, I'll tell you individually later. So there I am, go to MIT. Now, MIT, as you know, Ellie, is a scary place. It's got a big dome, and it's got brilliant kids from all over the world, highly focused, creative kids and faculty, and a lot is expected of you. So on my first exam on the course, which separates the men from the boys, I got a 50. I hadn't seen anything south of 92 in my whole life, 50. And I realized I was doing something wrong. So I recognized what it was. I had changed my study habits. I put the effort in. I got an A in the course. But my point is, it was a wake-up call. And as you know, there's two ways to respond to a wake-up call. One is to run, the other is to fight back. And the message to the young faculty here and to your children and your grandchildren, that's the way to approach life. So I decided to get a master's degree, and then when I was done, I was already married. I got married in college, and I already had a son, and they said, you got to get a PhD. I said, I don't want a PhD. I need a job, you know. They said, you got to get it. So, okay, I said, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to invest 4 years. I had two conditions. I'm going to work for the best professor I know at MIT, whose name was Claude Shannon. Some of you will recognize the name. Some may not, but he was a giant of a man who basically initiated the digital revolution we have today. So I started to work for him. And I said also, whatever I do, I want it to have impact. I don't want to work on a small problem. I don't want to waste my time on that. And all my classmates were working on what I considered small problems. And those problems were really very hard. I said, I want to find something nobody's worked on before because it'll be easy. You know, you can pick the things you want. And something that will have impact. And so I was surrounded by computers at MIT, and I realized sooner or later we're going to have to talk to each other. So I decided to do that. It would have impact. It was unmined. It was new. And I had an approach. So I worked on that, and I did, as the Chancellor said, worked on the mathematical theory of data networks. So that was very interesting. But I learned from Claude Shannon how to think about research, how to learn how to do research, and how to teach others how to do research. And his principles were amazing. First of all, this guy, brilliant mathematician, was also a tinkerer. He could juggle. He would ride down the halls in a unicycle. He'd walk into his office. In one hand, he'd have a differential gear. In the other hand, a Swiss Army knife. And he'd be busy opening the damn thing. So he had the ability to think about a problem, solve it, understand what was the implications of what he had done, to generalize it, and adapt it to the real world in a very meaningful way. That's something our engineers today don't necessarily have. And I think we have to enforce that. And some of that's happening now where they're getting their hands dirty with the maker machines and the Arduinos and the Raspberry Pis and all. I think that's really very important. So, done with my PhD, ready to take a job at MIT Lincoln Lab doing research. But they said, look, why don't you look around the world and see what other opportunities there are? They insisted on people doing that. Net result is UCLA offered me a job. Now, UCLA was all the way across the country in the Wild West. And that's what it was in those days. My family was back east. They were offering me a salary, half the salary I could get at MIT, and doing something I hadn't done. But it looked interesting. So I went to the folks at Lincoln Lab and I said, look, I have this dilemma. I want to work here, but there's this. They said, try it. If you don't like it, come back. How generous. We in industry should offer our young people that opportunity so they can make a choice that's meaningful to them. So I came out here, and this was an amazing place. It was an amazing place. I found colleagues, students, challenges. It was a culture of growth, collegiality, and teaching, and working with young students. It couldn't have been a better environment. I mean, being a professor, and we have plenty of them here, we have too much fun. The job is almost perfect. You don't have a boss. You have a boss? You don't have a boss. You think he's a boss? No. Boss? No. No. We do the research we want. We choose the students we want. We pretty much choose the classes we want. We work as hard as we want or not. And they actually pay us. We're having too much fun. So it couldn't be more ideal. It's prestigious. You travel. It goes on and on and on. So I loved it here. And in fact, the teaching and research side of it has been basically the wellsprings of my life. That's where I get my real gratification, in teaching young people, working with them, and producing results, and then understanding them. Now, there's another aspect that happened. You heard that DARPA decided to build a network, and we got involved with it. And there was, again, an infusion of a culture there which was magnificent, unique, almost never heard of. ARPA would go to a great scientist and say, we know you're great. Here's a pile of money. You're going to have it for a long time. Go do something. Shoot for the moon. High impact, high risk, high payoff. Failure's okay. Just keep working. And we're not going to bother you. I mean, you can't miss, right? Now, what does a faculty member do when they get that kind of money? What are you going to do with it? Well, you got your graduate students. You treat them the same way. Say, look, here's a problem. It needs to be solved. Go do it. Failure's okay, but try hard. Think out of the box. If you want help, I'll give it to you. We're not going to get in your way. And that era, that was a golden era in the 60s and the 70s, where enormous results came out of that community across the United States. The internet, time sharing, graphics, AI, machine learning, chip technology, just went on and on. It was a wonderful, wonderful environment. Unfortunately, well, out of that, we coined a phrase of 5 words. It says, and it's a guideline, delegate authority to trusted parties. It's a wonderful motto, if you think about it. Every word is important except the word to. Okay? It's very meaningful. And that's a principle that we've tried to employ in our work. Unfortunately, that philosophy deteriorated in the years beyond, and the funding profile changed dramatically. They would give a little bit of money in a highly competitive environment for a short period of time where failure was not acceptable and where you had to do it on a schedule and they were going to watch you. So it did take down our research productivity across the country. Happily, it's coming back now to that philosophy, that's the way to do it. We're beginning to see that in the funding agencies, thank God. But that's basically the secret of all the wonders you see today, that culture of permission and freedom and flexibility, and as you said, the trust, the collaboration, the openness, the sharing was key. And I think that's the strongest thing I want to say today, is that kind of approach is where you get the real rewards, the payoffs. Now, along the way, I met my wife, Stella, my second wife, this wonderful woman. And she is an inspiration. She's beautiful, she's brilliant, and she's a no-nonsense partner for life, in every sense of the word. As an example, when we lived in a certain place, she met the then mayor, Richard Riordan, and she got to know him, and I knew him a little bit. And one day down at the convention center in the mid-90s, he was introducing me as a speaker for a very large, thousands of people audience, and he went through the usual CV, and at the end he said, "But the best thing about Lenny is Stella." And that's the truth. My hat's off to you, Stella. And while we're on family, of course, the children in my life have been enormously important. Didn't spend enough time with them, and I regret that. And from children, you get something called dividends. They're called grandchildren. And I have one of my grandchildren right here, Rosa, who we've had the pleasure of growing up with her. We can relive that early, wonderful experience. But she's going to go off to college one of these days and come back. Magnificent. And all the rest of my family. So, along the way, 40 years ago, I decided to think about my early roots, and I said, I want to get back to the ability to protect myself in the streets of New York. So I took up martial arts, Japanese martial arts, Shotokan karate. And the reason I'm mentioning that here, because when you go there, you're no longer the boss. You obey what goes on in that dojo in the gym. When sensei says bow, I bow. When he says punch, I punch. And the difference between, it's a yin-yang. I mean, it clears your mind, it opens your ability up to think hard and work independently again. So I recommend mixed cultures, of orthogonal cultures, which don't match the model you have. So, one comment about the internet culture. The internet culture, which you described so well, Chancellor, it's gone from a research network to a shopping mall. It's in the dark phases, and it's up to all of us to do something about it and to demand accountability from the part of those who are abusing it. And that's a long agenda. We talked a lot about that at the 50th anniversary. Some of you may have heard it. It's a challenge from where this thing called the internet has gone. So in order to help promote that, we opened up a UCLA Connection Lab a few months ago with that spirit: open, collaborative, shared, reach high, reach beyond your grasp, etc. So from the streets of New York to the Chancellor's residence, that's the path. But the young people of today think most of it's done, it's hard to push forward, and they can't relate to people of that era. So there's a wonderful story I'd like to tell you. It's about this senior gentleman watching a baseball game, sitting in the bleachers. And next to him is a young guy, a millennial. And every so often the young man takes a look at the old guy. And finally he says, "Excuse me, sir, I find I can't relate to you. We come from different worlds. Maybe you had television, but you didn't have the internet, you didn't have computers, you didn't have basically Instagram, you didn't have social networks, you didn't have YouTube. I can't communicate with you." So the elderly gentleman says, "You know, son, you're right. We didn't have those things. So we had to invent them. What the hell are you going to do for the next generation?" So the point is there's plenty to do. And on that message, thank you very much.
Len, you were wonderful. Chancellor, you were wonderful. It's lovely to have a chancellor who's a chancellor on the outside, but an engineer on the inside. So good evening to all of you. It's lovely having you all here. I wanted to say a few words in appreciation of Len. You know, it used to be said, if you were, stuck on a desert island, the question you'd be asked is what books you'd bring with you, what records you'd bring with you. But Len's changed the answer to that question. Now it's a really simple answer. After food, after water, after shelter, the only thing that you'd really want is a fast Wi-Fi connection and a phone that you can power, of course. And that's it, really. Your needs are very simple nowadays. So I think in this university's 100th anniversary, I think a good case can be made that in our wonderful UCLA community, Len has made the biggest impact for the most people, for the greatest good. It's really rare to find a scholar that truly connects both the north and the southern hemispheres of our campus. Certainly in the early parts of his decades-long career, Len is focused on the frontiers of networking, and he's won just about every major global award, as well he should, for his pioneering work. But what makes the UCLA Medal truly special is that it honors a brilliant research, service, and teaching career that's a lot more than the sum of its parts. It's not just connecting computers, it's really about connecting people. And as Len himself has often said, after seeing his late mother start to use email, right? And it's really that greater concept that we at UCLA Samueli take to heart. We're not just developing new technologies for the sake of making something new, though that's an important endeavor as well. We're not just educating students to be good engineers so that they can get a good job, but of course they should get good jobs. But rather, we ask ourselves every day, how can we engineer change for the greater good of society? How can we empower our graduates so that they can do the same as they develop their careers? And so Len's been an exemplar of all of those ideas about our school. Of course, Len's always had an eye for what technologies mean for society. Let me read you an excerpt from a July 1969 UCLA press release titled, "UCLA to become the first station in a nationwide computer network." This is from 1969. And so here's what Len said. "As of now, computer networks are in their infancy," says Dr. Leonard Kleinrock, "but as they grow up and become more sophisticated, we will probably see the spread of computer utilities, which, like electric and telephone utilities, will service individual homes and offices around the country." This is in 1969. Now, how amazing is that, right? How amazing is that prediction? It would take many more decades of hard work, repeated testing of the internet that all of us know as it came into being, and a few more years went by before the arrival of instantaneous access from our cell phones that we've all come to expect. To imagine that the same mathematical formulae that he designed as a graduate student would still underpin our planetary nervous system. This is a truly amazing achievement. And it's really, yeah. And it's the internet of today that still motivates Len. He's moved beyond the technical aspects and instead really taken to his role as a senior statesman on keeping the internet true to its core values and those of its early developers. Yes, there is a dark side to the internet, as Len has so aptly put it, and now the onus is really on all of us, every one of us, to protect the network and to protect the people using that network so we can continue to reap its benefits over the next century and well beyond that. And so, Len, your contributions are immeasurable and awe-inspiring, and on behalf of everyone at the school, congratulations on receiving the UCLA Medal.
It's a great pleasure to follow Dean Murthy's witty and insightful remarks. But I wanted to give you a few more details, a little more of a lens on what Len has done, especially if you're not a computer scientist. So let me start by setting Len's work in perspective in the vast world of scholarship that embodies UCLA. Okay? How can we possibly compare a computer scientist with somebody in the humanities? How can we compare an artist with an engineer? Well, let me try and do this. But I'll try and do this by comparing him with two prior UCLA Medal Award winners who are household names, Yo-Yo Ma and Placido. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, Domingo. And although they're both musicians, and Len is an engineer. Well, one mark of notability is the Encyclopedia Britannica's biography pages, which unlike Wikipedia, is curated by expert editors. Well, Ma is among 816 biographies chosen by Britannica among musicians that range from Coltrane to Mozart. Domingo is among 951 singers chosen from Dylan to Pavarotti. By comparison, Kleinrock is among 118 computer scientists chosen from Bill Gates to Alan Turing. His specific citation reads, computer scientists who developed the mathematical theory behind packet switching and who sent the first message between two computers on a network that was a precursor of the internet. The first message, of course, as the Chancellor pointed out, was sent in Boulter Hall, and which in turn led to UCLA being the birthplace of the internet. But all three of these guys have received the highest honors in their respective fields in the United States. Domingo and Ma received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2002 and 2010. Kleinrock received the 2007 Medal of Science, which is the highest scientific honor in the US, for his fundamental contributions to the mathematical theory of modern data networks and for the functional specification of packet switching, which is the foundation of internet technology. But at a more profound level, each has created new worlds for the human spirit. Yo-Yo Ma has opened up musical vistas with the Silk Road Project, that some of you have heard of, and Domingo with Operalia, but Kleinrock helped catalyze the internet. The internet has, of course, unlocked new dimensions of our experience, from being the launchpad for democratic uprisings like the Arab Spring, to discovering long-lost friends on Facebook, to instantly hailing a cab with Uber. But even better, Kleinrock is one of our own, a professor who spent his entire career at UCLA, unlike Domingo and Ma. More specifically, Kleinrock is associated with 5 specific achievements. Okay? And the Chancellor is not supposed to do this. He's not supposed to be this computer scientist, but he did a great job. So I'm going to be very brief here. And so I would say it's the mathematical theory that underlies packet networks, the first message, but 50 PhD students, more than that, and I'd like to talk a little bit about them. The companies he has founded, I'd like to talk to you about that. And of course, the 1988 NRC report, which is the Gore report. Okay, so first, his PhD was revolutionary because it suggested taking messages and cutting them into little pieces called packets, which could wend their way in the network in different ways, compared to the traditional method, which was telephony, which reserved resources along a single path. Second, he continued developing the mathematical theories over 50 years at UCLA, with over 50 PhD students in 250 papers, incorporating, as he went along, new technologies like satellite and wireless. His UCLA students are a who's who of the networking world, including notable academics like Stanford's Tobaji, Columbia's Yemeni, Austin's Lamb, and our own UCLA's Mario Gerla. His 3-volume textbook queuing systems written at UCLA trained generations of students worldwide. Third, the ARPANET node, but the chancellors talked about it, so I'll skip that. But fourth, Kleinrock founded 2 very important companies that played a major part in the wireless revolution. Did you know that he was president and co-founder of Linkabit Corporation with Irving Jacobs and Andrew Witterby? And I suspect you've heard of them, but they are among the founders of Qualcomm. And Linkabit actually spun off, directly or indirectly, 75 companies, including the behemoth Qualcomm. Okay, clearly fifth, Vice President Al Gore is given a great deal of credit for legislation. The Chancellor talked about it. But it's interesting to see Britannica's version, which is not quite what you would expect from a somewhat biased UCLA report. Here is Britannica, I quote, Kleinrock chaired a National Research Council committee that produced a report that called for a single high-speed network to connect the existing fragmentary computer networks. Al Gore championed the report, and in 1991, the High Performance Computing Act, also known as the Gore Bill, was passed. Federal funding was made available for high-speed networks, dramatically upgrading the country's computing infrastructure. So this is Britannica. So Kleinrock's 55-year career at UCLA is stocked with service and strewn with honors. Len has served the world. Has he served UCLA? You bet he has. He chaired the computer science department from 1991 to 1995. In 2018, he continued as an emeritus professor, founding the UCLA Connection Lab, which just opened, to research topics whose underlying principle is connectivity. He won, which I really like, the UCLA Distinguished Teaching Award, the UCLA Outstanding Faculty Member Award, and the UCLA Dixon Emeritus Professor Award. He's a member, of course, of the National Academy of Engineering and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He has many honors, including the National Medal of Science, the Erickson Prize, the N.A.E. Draper Prize, the Marconi Prize, and a paragraph more, which I'll skip. All right, I had a few more details, and I decided to tear them up because the Chancellor basically scooped me. So I decided to end on a personal note. So I was a bachelor's student in India, and I was struggling to find direction. I wasn't doing very well. And my advisor had just come from UCLA, and he was Indian. His name was Arun Kumar, and he told me, you need to read this book, and maybe you can try and do some research. And it was this book called Queuing Systems that Len wrote. And I began reading it, and I was struck by the clarity and the energy of the ideas, right? And I began to work in queuing theory a little bit, and I did some research in it. And it seems to me the supremest irony that I'm standing here right now, right, going ahead and giving a little tribute, additional tribute to Len. So Len, not just congratulations for all your great work, but thank you on my own personal behalf.
When I think of the first time that the computer was installed in our bedroom, I had no idea that it would become such a major influence in the world today. The children were always kind of mystified as to why we had this machine sitting in our bedroom, and they would have to explain it to their friends, and Len would tell them to say simply that he was teaching at UCLA. There was one time when I woke up in the middle of the night and you were waiting for the program to run through on the computer, and so you decided to use that time to do your jumping jack exercises, and you also wanted to listen to music while you were doing it. And so I woke up to this 3-ring circus in our bedroom. It's been very dramatic and, for me, quite surprising.
Len, you've been a treasured and enthusiastic member of the UCLA faculty for 57 years and counting. Your extraordinary work that helped lay the foundation for today's internet is a tremendous point of pride to our campus.
Your work is such a gift to the world, and you are a gift to all of us who know you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for being a great friend, a great mentor, my relationship with you and Stella and the warm welcome each time I come to Los Angeles, something that will be with me forever.
Thank you for teaching me how to be a professor. And also, I convey your spirits to my students in Taiwan. So your influence is also all over here in Taiwan. I'm so proud as one of your students.
Well, congratulations to my good friend Leonard Kleinrock for the UCLA Medal. After all, I should congratulate him for everything. The thing he invented got my kids to college, bought my house, created the company. Thank you.
You are so devoted to your youngest granddaughter, Rosa, whom you dote on and can't allow yourself to miss one event that she participates in.
Len, you're an inspirational guy.
You're a wonderful, beloved father.
And an amazing grandfather.
We congratulate you.
We celebrate you.
And we love you.
Congratulations, Len, on receiving the UCLA Medal. Your contributions to UCLA are immeasurable, but one thing I can say for sure is we are very proud to call UCLA the birthplace of the internet.
I'd like to join the others in extending my warmest congratulations to long-term friend and colleague Len Kleinrock on this auspicious occasion of him receiving the coveted UCLA Medal. Congratulations, Len! Well deserved!
Len, you are a unique and special friend to me. You are kind, you are giving, you're considerate, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, you're courageous, you have great morals and ethics, you're a doting and loving grandpa, and I love you. Beautiful congratulations from Rini and myself.
Congratulations, Professor Kleinrock, and congratulations to UCLA for picking the exact right person to win an award like this.
I feel very fortunate to have you as a mentor, a colleague, and a friend. Congratulations again for this wonderful recognition.
Our entire campus community has been made better by your intellectual rigor and leadership. Thank you and congratulations.
Contrary to Len's claims, this is the original imp, not that poor excuse for a refrigerator that Kleinrock keeps in his lab.
They tell me you're brilliant, but I'm not a scientist, so I don't know.
And the whole world has both benefited and suffered from the invention. Let's not forget about the opportunity for creating fake news and distorting truth in general. Also, congratulations on helping destroy journalism as we know it, newspapers as we know them, all the small independent publications as we used to know them, and print in general.
But Lenny, I'm concerned, worried about one thing. You're sending all these packets up in the sky. What's going to happen when they start falling down?
What happens to all of these packets after their payloads have been delivered? They get thrown out, that's what. This is the next soda straw eco-disaster. Imagine all creatures, big and small, literally drowning in trillions of empty discarded packets. It is truly terrifying. This is how many packets have been discarded today alone. I ask you, what are you going to do about this, Kleinrock? Packets, schmackets. I say enough is enough. We're not going to put up with this anymore. Congratulations on all your well-earned success, Len, but I'm calling Congress to get some decisive, nonpartisan action to fix this packet mess you've created.
Well, the video says it all. No, What a great, that's the best video I've seen at the residence the time we've been here. That's wonderful. So again, thank all of you for being here. Congratulations, Len. Just phenomenal accomplishments, and we're so proud of you. So thank you all for being here, and drive safely.